Welcome to Inner Compass. I'm Shirley Hoogstra. We've read those stories. The angry criminal takes a hostage and demands to speak with authorities. So who should take the phone? And what would you say to someone like David Koresh? Well, today we're going to be talking to an FBI agent who's negotiated some of the most notorious hostage situations of the century. Join us on Inner Compass.
From the campus of Calvin College, this is Inner Compass, exploring how people use faith and ethics to guide them through critical issues of today.
My guest today is Jim Baden, who worked for years as a hostage negotiator for the FBI, and he is the author of Bullets, Bombs, and Fast Talk, 25 Years of FBI War Stories. Hi, Jim.
Good morning.
It's great to have you here. How did you go from a college graduate into the FBI?
I had a friend that was involved with the Drug Enforcement Administration, and he came home and, with his own war stories, and it interested me in law enforcement. And so after I finished at Calvin, I went down to Michigan State and got a master's degree in police administration, and then spent 3 years in the Army and came back and began my law enforcement career.
So in the FBI, there's some highly trained units that were assembled. And you were part of that first highly trained unit, weren't you?
I was. That was really after the incident at Wounded Knee in South Dakota, which was in 1973.
Which was a hostage situation,
correct? It was a
hostage
barricade situation with the American Indian movement. It went on for about 50 days, and it was very frustrating for the federal government to respond to it because they really didn't have the resources and the properly trained individuals to deal with that kind of long-term incident. And so after that, they created really the one component of crisis management, which was the SWAT team, and in the late 70s, and so the mid to late 70s. And so that's when that started. And then shortly after that, the hostage negotiators were added as a resource to crisis management.
And you were part of a SWAT team and the hostage negotiator team.
Yes, I originally started out as a member of the SWAT team and then took on additional duties really as the coordinator for the hostage team.
What did you like better?
Well, they each provide their own satisfaction. I think they're basically the goal of each is to resolve an incident without further violence. And some people mistake that. And they think the SWAT team is there to exercise some kind of tactical option, and they are if necessary. But we really all want to walk away from it without any additional violence, and so you've got to appreciate what's going on.
So you have to save lives.
Oh, exactly. That's the business, and with an organized response, with everybody having well-defined roles, we found that we were very successful doing that. Eventually, the FBI created a super SWAT, which we call the Hostage Rescue Team, and they also created a Crisis Incident Negotiation Team, a CINT team, which was a group of about 30 negotiators that they drew from around the states and put together as kind of a flying squad to respond to long-term and complex incidents.
And you would go all over. I mean, you would get the phone call, and they'd say, go up to Washington State, go over to the Cuban prison riots.
That's right.
You could go anywhere, right?
Yes.
On a dime.
On a dime.
Right. And so what did you say to your family?
Well, the first thing I would do is beg forgiveness of my wife, Robin, because I always seemed to leave her when the car needed tires or the plumbing went out in the bathroom or something. There was always some kind of crisis that happened when I was gone.
But this is a high service. You saw this as high service. These were high stakes incidents, and you were going to have really personal sacrifice in order to be involved.
Yes.
And your family had personal sacrifice to be involved.
They did. And my career has significant impact on my family. But I think that it's something that is characteristic of the FBI and FBI agents today, and you find that in the wake of 9/11, is just a tremendous dedication on the part of FBI personnel. They love the job. They come into the job, they give up higher paying jobs to come in and be an FBI agent.
Well, there's
very competitive.
Competitive, want to win, and high adrenaline, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Isn't that because you don't get high pay? So when I read in your book, it's a lot about getting credit for a job well done.
Well, the personal satisfaction is immense.
Right.
And especially with a hostage situation, and especially as a negotiator, when you talk to somebody that's threatening to kill somebody, he's pointing a gun at their head and threatening to kill somebody for hours at a time.
Right.
And you establish that connection. and you establish that trust on his part, and he realizes that he is being listened to, and that you're sincere and genuine, and he says, "Okay, I'm coming out." It's an incredible high. It's just incredibly euphoric.
Yes. Now,
Yes.
why do people take hostages?
A lot of people don't cope as well as we would like them to, and a lot of people deal with situations that they don't feel like they're getting the attention or they're being heard. And a lot of hostage takers simply want to be heard. If they wanted to commit a crime, if they wanted to hurt somebody, they could do that before the police or before the FBI arrived.
Right.
What they want to do is they want to hold them hostage as having some kind of value, and they want to tell the story. They want to get the story out. They want to have somebody listen to them. And it can be any number of things, whether it's a domestic situation, an interrupted crime, a terrorist group that has a manifesto they want to read on the air. There's just a million different reasons that people take hostages, but the basic reason is they want to tell you something.
They want attention, either to for a cause, that's the manifesto piece, or maybe just to say, I'm valuable, watch me, look at me, care about me.
Or I have something that I think is important and the rest of the world is not interested in. We had an incident in Los Angeles years ago where a hostage taker took a building manager hostage on the roof of a downtown office building and insisted that the negotiators bring the media to the scene and film him making a statement that smoking is harmful to your health.
Oh, boy. Boy. Well,
Once he did
it's
that,
true, but
yeah.
I don't know if you take a hostage for that.
But once he did that, and once it was completed, and he was assured that it would be shown on the news, he surrendered and released the hostage and surrendered, and it was over.
Okay, so you have to be a mind reader, a counselor, priest, pastor, because you have to figure out what motivates these people fairly quickly, don't you?
Certainly. And the first question a negotiator asks himself is, why is this happening?
Okay.
And even driving to the scene, flying to the scene, whatever it may be, the question is always, why is this happening? And the clues to that are, number one, the location. Is it an IRS office? Is it an apartment complex? Is it in a residential home? All of those are clues. Is it in a school? They're kind of a unique situation because schools and kids are very, very dynamic, right. And that's a whole different subject. But the location is very important. The demands are very important, and the threats are important. Is he demanding something unrealistic? Right. Is he? For example, we had one in Los Angeles where this guy took over a bank and he wanted the president of the United States to fly to Hollywood in Air Force One and to come to the bank and to upgrade his bad conduct discharge to an honorable discharge, which the reasonable person would find somewhat unrealistic.
Correct.
And so it's a clue as to what kind of person you're dealing with.
So how did you deal with him? How did you get that person to say, hey, maybe we can accomplish that? And did you have to overpromise? Like, as a negotiator, did you ever have to promise things that you really couldn't deliver on?
Well, that's certainly an issue that we try to stay away from, because the connection made between the negotiator and the hostage taker is what is going to resolve the incident. It's not magic and mirrors. It's not saying the magic word and having him say, well, that's it, you've convinced me. It's a relationship of trust. And once that's established, you can gradually, with a rational and reasonable individual, convince him that what he's doing is going to be a dead end eventually, and that this needs to be resolved in that way. But when you deal with mentally disturbed people, you really can't control that. And this guy was mentally disturbed. He was somewhat
in the bank situation.
In the bank situation. And he'd had a long history of drug use. And so when you're dealing with somebody like that, they're very sporadic, and you really, really don't know how things are going to go, because you can't go down a logical, reasonable road with them. You've got to kind of deal with it as it happened. And with him, the negotiator did establish a relationship with him. And eventually he said, those people in the bank, they don't really belong to you. They're Bank of America customers. And Bank of America is concerned about those people. And the hostage taker said to the negotiator, he said, "You're right, Jack." He says, "You're right." He said, "I'm going to let them out." And at that point, he stood up and said, "Okay, you can all go." And they went out like a prison escape.
They couldn't believe it, probably.
No, of course they couldn't, and neither could we. And that was it. And then he was in there by himself, and he talked with the negotiator for a little while, and he agreed to let him talk to the media. And afterwards, he surrendered, and afterwards he came out, and we gave him about a 15-second opportunity to talk to the media. That was it, but it was resolved without violence. So there are times when you do have to promise things that are dubious, but you certainly don't want to lie to them if at all possible. That's just because it goes to your credibility. So it's much easier and a much better way to go is just simply say, I don't know if we can do that.
Right. So how do you know when they're going to act on a violent threat, which has to be happening throughout these conversations, this roller coaster?
You really don't. And that's where just your experience kicks in. And a critical part of the crisis management business is for the on-scene commander to listen to the negotiators. Now, he's got a tactical element there ready to make an entry.
This is the SWAT team or whatever, yeah.
That, if necessary, can go in there and exercise a lethal option with a hostage taker. But you don't want to do that. It's only as a last resort. And so normally the on-scene commander would say to the negotiator, what do you think? Now, he's making these threats. He's giving deadlines. He may fire the gun off in the background. He may get a hostage to scream on the telephone. All these are designed to increase your anxiety and your frustration and your feeling that I've got to comply with his demands, and you've just got to ride that horse. And it can be very, very stressful for a negotiator, and it's just part of the job. And that's why we train in very realistic situations to put people in very stressful positions, because you have to deal with that, and you have to accept the fact that he may be making threats, he may be injuring hostages, but you've got to stick with your procedures. Try to build that relationship with him, and try to convince him that this is not the way to go.
So David Koresh in the Waco, Texas incident.
Yes.
So a lot of times they do result in a successful release, and there's less bloodshed. But in that particular case, we know that there was a sort of an inferno. David Koresh was completely unstable, and the cult members were very much at his beck and call and under his authority and command. So when you look at that incident where there was a decision to go in, what kind of evaluation did your team make after that incident?
Well, there really wasn't a decision to go in.
There wasn't.
The decision was made to put gas into the location, right. But they never intended to make actual entry into the compound. And they told them that. They told them that the day before, and said, tomorrow we're going to put gas into the compound. We want you to come out ahead of that, and we're going to give you 12 hours because we're going to start tomorrow morning. We want you to come out. We want you to bring the children. This has gone on long enough.
And how many days into this whole siege?
This was 51 days.
Yeah, right.
And Koresh had been working on his interpretation of the 7 seals in Revelations, and he had completed his written explanation of seal number 1 at the end of
51 days.
Yeah, and at that point, the negotiators, and I think the crisis management team felt that this has gone on long enough. We're going to have to stimulate some kind of activity in his part. We don't want to go in there and hurt anybody. We don't want to go in there and shoot anybody. We have a lot of kids in there, but the living conditions were deplorable. They were completely under his control. He was a very traditional and very successful cult leader. Right. And as we talked to people through the 51 days, we would say, are you willing to come out? Would you like to come out? And they would say, yes, but I have to talk to David first. And after they would talk to David, sometimes they'd come back, sometimes they wouldn't, but they wouldn't come out. And he would convince them not to come out. So we gave them a lot of warning ahead of time, saying, we're going to do this, but we are not going to make entry. And so the next morning, their answer to that was when the vehicles that were brought up to put the gas and insert the gas, they threw the hostage phone out the front door and slammed the door. And it was like, now what do we do? So we moved the negotiator at that point, the primary, Byron Sage, was moved up to the front of the compound, and at that point began to bullhorn them.
Which is huge personal risk for that negotiator.
Huge personal risk. And trying to make this connection and trying to get them out and trying to rely on the parents to exercise that concern for their kids and release the kids. And it just didn't happen.
Did you ever think in that situation, deplorable situation as it was, these people had made a commitment, there was some sexual abuse, it appeared, going on in that compound. Did you ever think, look, we're not going to be able to move this forward. Let's just all back up and go home and try a different tack.
Well, we couldn't leave.
Why couldn't you leave?
We couldn't leave because 4 ATF agents had been killed. About 10 had been wounded in the initial shooting that Friday morning when they first made the approach to the building and the entry. Right. We also had a number of people that were killed inside. So we had a federal crime. We had assault on a federal officer, and we had federal officers killed. So we couldn't leave that one. But that's an interesting point, and that there are situations, and they sometimes occur in a domestic situation where Mom and Dad will get in a fight, an argument, and it's usually fueled by alcohol or drugs. And Mom runs outside and says, you know, he's been beating on me and he's got a gun. And the cops arrive. They call 911. The cops arrive and they try to talk to him. He's got no one inside. He's not threatening anybody. He's not holding anybody hostage. He says, this is my house. I haven't done anything except get in an argument with my wife. Go away.
Right.
And the question you have to answer is this a threat to community safety? Right. Does he still pose a threat now? If he's got a gun and he's shooting out through the front door, the windows, which happens occasionally, he does pose a threat to community safety. And so you've got to stay with it, and you're going to have to work that out. But there are situations where you may be able to walk away from it. Waco was just not one of them. It was much too complex. Okay. The stakes were too high.
So how does the FBI care for this whole team who has been working towards a peaceful resolution, hoping that that happens, and then sees this inferno of these buildings? Is there a way, do you get psychological counseling? Is there time off? Is there crisis, post-traumatic stress kind of crisis care? Does the government do that for their officers?
We would typically debrief every incident.
Okay.
Both the SWAT team and the negotiators would debrief, and immediately afterwards you lose a lot of honesty by saying, let's come in tomorrow morning and we'll talk about what happened yesterday.
Right.
You lose a lot of honesty and you can never recapture it. So we would always debrief, no matter how long it had gone and what time of the day or night it was. We'd go back to the office and sit right then and talk what happened. And we'd also debrief with the SWAT team and say, we like the way you did this, we didn't like the way you did it. What you did here hampered us. With Waco, which was just so almost global in nature, it was a tremendous crisis, and what happened after the end of 51 days was exactly what we had tried to prevent for 51 days, and people were really hurting. And so the FBI had a conference back at Quantico, the FBI Academy, and brought back anybody that was in Waco and wanted to come back could attend. And they did have a very large-scale psychological debriefing, hoping that they would prevent PTSD in the future. Right. And they broke down, they started with the initial group of several hundred people. I mean, we had, I think there were, the estimates were, and I think they're in the book there, about 250 law enforcement personnel a day were committed to Waco. Right. It was tremendous, huge cost and resources, what have you. But they brought all these people back, and they did this as a group, and then they broke them down into the SWAT guys and the negotiators and the pilots and the tech people and all the different people that were involved in it, and debriefed separately because they knew of the significance. And
what did you learn from that situation?
The next one that happens, the FBI is going to spend a little more time negotiating. They're not going to take that aggressive action, which Koresh considered intrusive with the gas, and we misread him, and it turned out to be exactly what he wanted, which was his personal Armageddon. And
there is this turf war that would come up with these kinds of incidents. When I mean, who was in charge was an issue, wasn't it?
Well, there was, and historically, SWAT teams preceded crisis negotiators, and so for a long time, SWAT teams would drive decision-making at the scene. And that was an issue because, and I liken it to, if the only thing you've got in your hand is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. and so, you know, initially in the 70s and the early 80s, there was a strong presence of tactical personnel at hostage and barricaded situations. Over time, that turned and that changed. And the important thing was that for the negotiators to develop the same, to be able to sit at the table just like the SWAT team.
An equal partner in decision-making.
Equal partnership. And the key for that was to have the on-scene commander recognize that I've got these resources out there and I've got to use each appropriately. And when negotiation began to be successful, Success created success. And when they saw that it worked, in essence, negotiators created for law enforcement a new paradigm that you needed to try this first, because in the past it's worked. And it became less costly, which really drew the attention of the managers, the crisis managers. It's cheaper to negotiate than to use any kind of violence or force. And so that caught their attention, and they thought, well, listen, we've got to pay attention to this. You always end up paying money if you hurt anybody, if you kill anybody. You're going to be sued, and it's going to cost you money, so we got to do this first. And so if you don't try to use your crisis negotiators first, and you go right to a tactical option, and it's hard to back up on that. When your SWAT team is taking a sniper shot at a guy that missed, it's hard as a negotiator to tell the subject,
don't worry,
I'm here to help.
Yeah, you have played that card.
Yes.
So you've talked a little bit about what happens with a trial or police tactics. When you read your book, you could feel the high risk, the tension, that there's a lot at stake here. And so there's got to be trust between members of the team.
Yes.
And there also has to be an adherence to sort of the rule of law. And you can, in these high risk situations, sometimes behavior, you probably saw as an FBI agent, you write about it in your book, behavior that fell a little short of some of that way in which you treat people that you were arresting. We watched programs like Law and Order, and you'll see the character, take him by the throat, and you go, oh, I hope that really doesn't happen. But there is a story, a couple stories. You had a story about Ralph, who's trying to push a guy out of the back seat of a cruiser. And you're driving, and he's angry at these felons that he has picked up, these fugitives. Now, what kinds of thoughts were going through your head? You're not participating in that. You're driving the car. You're seeing your partner here act in ways that are not correct.
Yeah.
What did you do?
Well, my immediate reaction was I couldn't believe it was happening.
Right.
But sometimes, people act inappropriately, and it certainly was. I think the part of it's the relief that it's over, that we had captured this guy. He was wanted for murder up in Washington. It was, I think, the closest I had come to ever shooting somebody and not shooting somebody.
Adrenaline.
And the adrenaline is just immense. And I think the relief of finally, having him in custody, he's no longer going to hurt anybody, was part of it. But it was certainly inappropriate behavior, and that happens. It just does. It's unfortunate, but in the business, there's a lot of violence in policing that people really don't see or understand, and until you've been up close or been involved, and it's unfortunate, but it's not always a clean job, and cops are human, and they can sometimes step over the line, and it happens.
But you didn't write him up. Maybe
No,
he should have lost his job.
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so, no.
The story is over the top, where he is terrorizing the fugitives. Now, there are times I'm sure you felt that they deserved every bit of terror that they got, but you guys are the police officers. You guys are the FBI. Didn't those fugitives deserve better, even if they were crummy people who had done horrible things?
Yes.
Yeah. But it's a hard call, isn't it, Jim?
It is.
Because you know all the pressures that you guys are under. And you know that 95% of the time you are doing an excellent job in a job no one else wants to do, but everybody wants done. And then someone crosses the line. And do they lose a whole lifetime of good work for crossing the line? That's got to be hard.
It is difficult.
Yeah. Today, we have Homeland Security. Now, is there a crisis negotiating team still?
Yes.
There is.
There is, and it's probably more active than when the FBI put together this flying squad of negotiators, the Crisis Incident Negotiation Team, in '85. And the impetus was we needed some people that we could readily call on to run and jump. Interestingly, we went back to Quantico for a week. And that Friday, we had TWA 847 hijacked, and it went on for, if you recall, a couple of weeks and flew all around the Mideast, and it was just kind of like, okay, this is what we do. But they've become much more active in overseas hostage recovery situations, and more so than anything.
It's a global problem.
It is a global problem. And 9/11 completely destroyed our innocence. Prior to that, we always felt that Americans are at risk overseas, but we felt reasonably safe here in America. We have good law enforcement.
Right.
Our infrastructure is sound. We have intelligence gathering agencies. We got along with the CIA, probably not as good as we should have, but we got along with them.
Right.
And then 9/11 happened, and 9/11 taught us that we're never going to be safe again. These people, hate us. They're going to try to kill us. Right. They are global in nature. They train over there. They come back here. We have to worry about self-starting cells over here. We have to worry about people that are trained over there come back as a mole now over here.
Right.
And so our lives have changed. And as a result of that, the FBI has put together joint terrorism task forces around the country. We're holding hands with the CIA like we never have before.
Which is really one of the impetuses for bringing all the law enforcement together, wasn't it?
Yes.
Do you miss it?
Terribly. I just got old.
You do it all over again?
I do it all over again. I had a wonderful time.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
My guest today has been Jim Baden, author of Bullets, Bombs, and Fast Talk, 25 years of FBI war stories. I'm Shirley Hoogstra, and thank you for watching Inner Compass.